We're going to be talking a bit about the past of AI and also its future. I want to start with talking about where we are now. So what are the most exciting cutting edge things you've seen from AI at the moment?
Well, AI seems to have something exciting happening every couple days. So it's hard to say which is the most exciting. But to put everything in perspective, we're going through this very rapid period of development, and it's hard to predict where it's heading. Very hard to predict. But there's something that I think will put this in perspective, which is that I think we are in a period very similar to that of the Wright brothers 100 years ago. That is to say, we've just gotten off the ground. And there's a lot of interesting issues and problems that we face to get to the point where we have you can trust AI and have a safe way of using it. By the way, I read a biography of the Wright brothers, very, very thoughtful. And one thing I learned was that their first flight, they crashed and burned many times, right? But they did. The first flight was reached a level of 10 feet and traveled 100 feet. Now, it took a long time for them to go from that to something that was controllable. That was the most difficult problem, is how do you make a reliable turn, for example. And AI is going through exactly the same kind of teething problems, right? How do you make it reliable? How do you regulate it? This is all part of technology development that has happened over and over and over again.
Okay, I mean, that's quite a strong analogy, saying it's like the Wright brothers moment where we had the first flight, because that was just such a huge moment for humanity. But at the same time, that also makes it sound kind of unimpressive. They only flew 10 feet high and for 100 feet and no turns. But yeah, I suppose it shows the power of what's to come.
Right.
Yeah, exciting things in the future, but maybe we'll talk about the past first. So, I mean, artificial intelligence, I think the term was coined like 60 years ago. I know you've not been working in the field quite that long, but can you talk us through some of the major developments that you think have got us to this point?
AI, when it was first developed, used computers that by today's standards are like watches, or actually not even as powerful as watches, right? They took up whole rooms, vacuum tubes, and the only thing they could do well was logic. And so AI tried to develop the right programs using logic and rules and symbol processing to try to replicate human intelligence. And I think it's fair to say that they vastly underestimated the complexity of that problem. So the real advance that, in my mind, that made modern AI possible was learning. So, in the early days, you had to write a program and take into account every possible complexity or detail that could possibly happen, which, of course, mushroomed combinatorically. But if you can learn from examples, then all you need to do is have more and more data. And so learning algorithms for neural networks were developed in the 80s, which overcame some of the early limitations. And I was involved in that with Geoff Hinton, mid-80s. But what we didn't know back then was how well it would scale. And in computer science, the way that you classify algorithms in terms of their complexity is how does it scale with the size of the problem as the problem gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it turned out that the neural networks scale beautifully. And in fact, they had to, because of the fact that nature discovered that long ago, that more neurons are better, right? You have bigger brains, you have better capabilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the switch from all those sort of expert systems to machine learning, that was absolutely huge. And yeah, just having models that can learn has been obviously world changing. Okay. I'd also like to talk about the NeurIPS conference, since you've been involved with NeurIPS, I think, for many years now. What sort of role do you think this conference has had in shaping the field of machine learning?
So the NeurIPS conference began in the 80s as a way to bring together people from many, many different fields, a tremendous diversity, ranging from people interested in mathematics, engineers trying to solve difficult problems like computer vision, statisticians, who are dealing with large problems and large data sets. It really brought together, an incredible number of different backgrounds, languages, and I have to say, during the first few years, it was very difficult because we didn't have a common language. We didn't have a way of talking to each other. The neuroscientists would get up and give a talk about the basal ganglia, and everybody would just glaze over. The mathematicians would get up and start putting up equations, and the neuroscientists' eyes would glaze over. And the only ones that actually got through to everybody were the engineers, because they were very explicit about, here's the problem I have to understand this image, and here's how I'm going about it. But overall, over the last, I think we're having the 38th conference coming up in December, that community came together over decades and developed a real common interest in what now, in retrospect, is how you do computing in high-dimensional spaces. High dimensions in terms of the number of parameters, if you're a statistician, high dimensional in terms of the data sets that you need in order to be able to tweak those parameters. And like I say, nature was there ahead of us, right? We have 1 million billion synapses. Those are parameters in our brains. And we use those every day to deal with the complexity of the world. And that's what it takes. And that's what it took.